And you also, another thing I remember is you're not allowed to wear white bibs. That was something I also learned from you. You don't remember that lesson either?
I don't.
That's okay, but I don't wear white bibs.
That is just good. I mean, that's right. Right? Like, learn how to tie your shoes. No white bibs.
No
like,
white
it just
bibs.
seems like that's just good life.
Seems like common sense.
Well, you would think.
Welcome to Brainstoke. Tom Telford, Preston Niederhauser. We're so excited to be here, our 15th episode that we're recording in an incredible Logan Valley, Cache Valley in Smithfield, and excited to have our awesome guest with us here today. This is all possible because of Aspire Network, which is a mental health company in the state of Utah that consists of Aspire Counseling, Aspire Medical, and Aspire Billing. So thank you, Aspire Network, for your support of the podcast. Let's dive in.
Yeah, so today we are with Kirk Eck and his son, TJ Eck. And Kirk is a longtime friend of mine and my family. Kirk's the one that introduced me to a road bike. So Kirk is current assistant coach at Skyview High for their Utah High School Cycling League team. And TJ is going to be a senior this coming year and raced varsity last year and will be racing varsity this year.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll dive into this. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, Kirk is Cache Valley cycling royalty. He's super humble guy.
Are you United?
Apparently.
I bet he has keys to the city. He has won LOTOJA 6 times. A couple times as a Cat 1, a couple times as maybe a Master 1, or 2 times as a Cat 3. So he's kind of all categories. He's seen that you've done the race. How many times have you done that race?
24.
24 times. Last time I think you did it maybe 2019, or have you done it since then?
That was the last one.
Okay. I might have done some research. I jumped on USA Cycling, Googled your name there, and lots of results, lots of podiums in all of those results. So
I asked AI, ChatGPT, I'm like, who's the coolest LOTOJA rider ever?
Kirk Eck.
Yep.
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
Smartest thing on the planet.
So Kirk, you may not remember this, but you introduced my older brother to road racing, and I think he bought your bike, maybe a Trek 5500 or a Trek 5900 at the time. Does that?
Yeah. I helped him buy, I think, at least 2 other bikes first. And then eventually I did start selling him bikes.
You started selling him your last year's bike, right?
Right.
And then I became the beneficiary of that as well. That whole cycle. So ultimately I ended up on a Kirk Eck bike after my brother had it a year. Then I would get it for a year, and it was the trickle down, the hand-me-down effect.
Nice.
But yeah.
And how many LOTOJA first place finishers between you and Mason?
Well,
on those bikes.
There's something about the motor on those bikes. Kirk could figure out how to put them on the podium, but my brother and I, not so much.
So it's not about the bike.
It's not about the bike.
Thank you, Lance Armstrong. You're right. It's not about the bike.
As we'll probably learn today, it's not about the bike. Yep. TJ, you're a NICA athlete. Did you race Devo?
Yeah,
I
did 7th and 8th grade.
7th and 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So you're going into your 6th year as a NICA racer. How's that been?
It's been so fun.
How come?
I just love racing and getting to go train and ride with the team and to get to know my opponents better and build relationships with them.
Yeah. Isn't that something that's cool about NICA is even though you compete against, like, I think you knew my son Mitt, right? Even though you compete against one another, like at the finish line, everybody just kind of buds or in the pits. And I've always appreciated that about NICA, as we can all compete against one another, but we're all just buds too. And that there's something cool about NICA where we don't necessarily see that in other sports, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Early on, I remember TJ finishing a race, getting off his bike and going and hugging some kid that I had no idea who it was. And so afterwards I'm like, who's that? He's like, oh, we just rode with each other today and got to know each other. And he's a really cool kid.
and all of a sudden they're best buds.
Yeah. And then after that, it just builds each race.
Yeah. You won't even hug your mom, but you'll hug this kid from
Who's all muddy and sweaty and he's hugging him. Yeah.
Yeah.
TJ, I'm interested to know, if you don't mind, dive into that, because as you look back, you have two older brothers who raced. So you've been to a lot of races. I probably, even before you were racing, you were going to races, right?
Yeah.
So you're watching it. So talk a little bit about your experience with older brothers going to races, and then reflect a little bit more on what is in that moment where stranger to you, you're hugging them. Why? What is it about that? Because that is a cool thing in cycling. It seems like in Utah NICA, when kids get to know each other, even if they're competing, and there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my two older brothers used to race, and so I would go to races all the time, even though I wasn't old enough to compete. So I kind of got the feel for it. And then like growing relationships with like people I'm racing against. Sometimes in races, we would just chat. I remember just having a conversation with some kid once. Totally didn't know who he was, and we were just in the middle of a race, but we were just chatting it up. And then some years it would be really close between me and a couple certain kids. So like he would beat me sometimes, I would beat them the other times. And just after a while, we kind of learned to race with each other. And like in the race, it was really cool because we would like push each other to go harder, and we would like ride strategically with each other.
That's awesome. When you think through that, I'm interested, Kirk. I want you to talk about this a little bit from a coach's perspective, and even maybe your LOTOJA experience. But it seems like once riders turn, they have a shift in their mindset that by working with my competitors, I get stronger, faster, and we can separate ourselves from others. So that there is a component where your competitor is one of your greatest allies. And so when you go back to what you just said a minute ago, your story about hugging someone you didn't necessarily know, it seems like regardless of competing with someone out there in the race, that there's a mutual respect, right? Even if you want to beat them, you respect the fact that they're doing the work, they're suffering just like you are, and that brings connection, right? And this is going to be a theme, I think, today overall, because I want to come back to that with the two of you, right? Suffering brings connection. So talk about that, Kirk, a little bit from your racing experience and also from a coach perspective.
That is so true. So my wife just can't wrap her head around this, that I'm so close to the guys that I used to be teammates with. And they were guys that didn't even live here in the Valley. We rarely trained together, but we would race together. And they're some of my best friends. And we still don't see each other often because now we're all over the country. So we talk via text or whatever. But fighting together, it's almost like you go to war together. And you develop these bonds that are just super, super strong. But even outside of that, like you just mentioned, you get in a breakaway with somebody and you create an allegiance with them because you got to get off the peloton. And so you develop these friendships with these guys who you're competing with, but you're best buddies for 50 miles. And then the last 3 miles, you start hitting each other and attacking and beating each other up. But you develop these close bonds through doing that. It's kind of unique because you're right. You suffer together, and somehow that makes you friends.
Yeah, we, and I know you guys used to do, or I assume you still do, a Tuesday night ride. We also do a Tuesday night ride with our group of 20 guys, and we do the exact same thing. We go and suffer and go as hard as we can and beat the snot out of each other. But we end up having these great bonds where when we go on our recovery rides, it's so fun to go with that same group of guys because we're able to go and relax and laugh and talk about last night's Sufferfest. You know, there's definitely something about doing that and doing something hard together with somebody.
Absolutely. Yep.
TJ, do you see that? I'm interested to know maybe in school. So even kids who you may not hang out with all the time or your best buddies, but if they're on the team and they're coming to practice and they're doing the work, does that, in your head, is there a respect there where you may not be hanging out with them, but it's someone that you respect just because you're seeing also the work they're putting in, right? The suffering that they're doing, you know, on their bike. You know, you can't ride it with them, right? It's super interesting that way, where they're doing their own thing and yet you're seeing that and there's a respect that comes from that. So has that been your experience?
Yeah, a little bit. Like getting to see them at practice, like a kid you normally like don't know at school, kind of like changes the way you see them. Not they aren't just some kid, but they're some kid who shares similar interests with you and a kid who's disciplined and can push themselves. And it's really cool getting to kind of make those bonds. Like might not do something with them like outside of practice, but like saying hi in the halls to the kids on the team.
Yeah.
Don't you wish the football kids knew how hard that kid worked?
Yeah.
I think about that all the time, right? If some of the people knew how hard these kids, how much effort and work they put into their cycling, I think it would blow a lot of those other student athletes away, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. TJ, tell me, do you remember the first time watching your dad race a bike?
Not really. I kind of like LOTOJA. I remember going to those every year. I think for the first like little bit of my life, like younger years, I didn't really understand what was happening. I'm just like, oh, it's our yearly trip to Jackson Hole.
that takes a really long time.
Yeah, we get a stop in Afton. And
Dad's in spandex. Yes.
yeah. I think as I did get a little bit older, I started to understand, but didn't really understand it that deeply until I had really raced myself.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you saw your dad? Actually, let me rephrase that. When did you realize that your dad was pretty good on a bike?
Probably like 5th or 6th grade, just like because I started going to more races with my siblings and starting to get the feel of it and understand like winning races and that kind of thing, and learned that he had won a lot of races.
Yeah. You know, your dad did the Tour of Utah, right?
I did not.
Yeah, your dad raced the Tour of Utah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a true story. I also remember your dad always wore red gloves. Do you remember that?
I had a pair of red gloves. I don't know what I would say. I always wore them.
In my mind, I always remember, maybe it was probably just one race. You know, it was a crit in Ogden, but you were in red gloves. And it just made it so easy for me as a fan to like always see the red gloves coming around the corner. So I always knew where you were.
It wouldn't surprise me if my wife told me to do that. I don't remember that, but she did tell him to wear pink socks so that we could pull him out of the crowd.
Perfect. Smart. And you also, another thing I remember is you're not allowed to wear white bibs. That was something I also learned from you. You don't remember that lesson either?
I don't.
That's okay, but I don't wear white bibs.
That is just good. I mean, that's right. Right? Like learn how to tie your shoes. No white bibs.
No
like,
white
it just
bibs.
Seems like that's just good life.
Seems like common sense.
Well, you would think, right?
You only have to see somebody have a bad experience in white bibs once, and it leaves a mark, and you never want to wear them.
So true. So true. Take us back, Kirk, to your beginning. Share a little bit of your childhood with us, and how did you end up riding a bicycle at this intense level and the competitive nature?
Boy, I'm going to try and make it short because this could take up all of our time. But it's a strange history, I think. As a kid, I did the usual stuff. I played baseball and football and really got into football and became a gym rat. And through high school, I just ate as much as I could and tried to get as big and heavy as I could because I wanted to be big for football. And I actually played offensive line, believe it or not. And one of my buddies on the offensive line got a road bike one year, and he talked me into getting one my senior year. So we were these two big muscle-bound guys on these road bikes that, I'd ride 10 miles and think that I had just accomplished an Ironman or something. But that was my beginning. And then I served an LDS mission where I was on the bike every day for 2 years. And that's probably where I really started to like it. But when I came home, mountain bikes were just coming out. And so I got one and kind of liked that and decided I was going to race mountain bikes a little bit. And I was still lifting weights all the time. And I did pretty good. And then I crashed and broke my wrist. And I was working at a sporting goods store that sold bikes. And so I got talked into upgrading my road bike. And when they casted my wrist, they put it in a position that I could ride a road bike. Couldn't ride the mountain bike, but I could ride the road bike. And at that time, I kind of gave up the weightlifting and was starting to trim down. And I got hooked on road cycling. And
What age was that? Is this
I think
at
I was
Al's?
25, 26.
Okay, so you were at Al's at that time.
Yeah.
I read somewhere at LinkedIn or somewhere just that you were at Al's for a stint. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I was 26 when I did my first road race. And I was slimming down, but I still had, really strong, powerful legs. So I would suffer like a dog on the hills, but I was a really good sprinter and ended up being a good time trialist. And it just kind of worked out for me. So I never went back to the mountain bike racing. I got hooked and just did road for a long time. There was a local team here that was just forming. It was a bunch of college kids, and they talked me into joining with them from the TNR. I met them at the TNR, and they talked me into joining this little race club. We were the LA Sheriffs. It was a national club that had a Utah chapter, and that was us. So my first couple of years, I raced for the LA Sheriffs, interestingly enough. Yeah, but I just got hooked, and it replaced... People that haven't done this don't understand it or don't believe me, but, you go into a football game, and that adrenaline and the thrill of combat is a big thing. And after high school, I just never found that. And I think that's why I kept getting into the weight so much, as I was looking for that adrenaline rush and something to fill that. I had developed this need to exercise to get rid of my frustrations. As a high school kid, my mother passed away when I was 16. And I was probably an angry kid anyway, but I just had a lot of aggression, frustration, like a lot of 16-year-olds do. And I learned to take it out on the weights. And, through exercise, that's how I would clear my mind and calm myself down. And the bike did that. The first time I lined up for a race, I felt that adrenaline and that drive to compete that I haven't felt for like 7 years. And it was amazing for me. And the first time I did a criterium, I was like, all right, full contact, because there's a lot of bumping in those. And I loved it. That's early in my racing career. That's what I loved the most, was criteriums.
Did you connect that at a young age as a teen? You mentioned, losing your mother at 16. Did you connect that, hey, going in the weight room, I feel differently? Or was it just later reflecting back, like, hey, I'm seeing this, I'm experiencing
I think it was
this.
later.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was, you get hooked in sports, whether it's mountain biking or football or lacrosse or basketball. You feel like you belong to something. And so I felt like I belonged to that football team. It gave me an identity. And so it was later when I was reflecting, actually when I wasn't able to exercise, I was like, I'm going crazy here. What's going on? And they're like, I haven't worked out. I got to go do something.
Yeah.
Having your mom pass away when you were 16, how do you think you handled that?
Probably not great. At the time, I thought I did.
You said you were angry. What was that? Because of that?
That was probably part of it. Yeah. And just the usual frustrations, I think, of being an adolescent. I think I just had the usual frustrations. And then on top of that, my mom passed away, and I was in a kind of a unique, lonely situation for a lot of years.
Yeah. How old were your siblings? How close were your siblings to you at that point?
My next closest one is 4 years older than me.
Okay.
And he happened to be on a mission when she passed away.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I was home alone for a while.
And what was your relationship like with your father?
Not great.
Wasn't?
No.
So you felt alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting as we meet with student athletes. I spoke to some students recently, Preston did, Jackson did. And when we start talking about, and they were all mountain bikers, by the way, you know, it was NICA stuff, team captain stuff. And as you start hearing, you know, kids' stories, those words are similar that come up. I was angry, you know, I felt lonely. Some of those similar components a lot of student athletes have when they're teens. If they're boys, they're full of testosterone anyway. You know, that they want to do something with the energy and they're feeling that. But if there's also other relational things going on in their family, you know, Payson, if you listen to his episode, he outright says, I became really good at putting all my emotions into the pedals. I just mashed the emotion. And obviously he turned out being pretty good. But when he first started, he really referenced that he just had a lot of anger because of what was going on in his personal life. And, you know, one of the things that we talk about in Brainstoke is the 5 S's. And 2 of those really are stoke and sweat. And those tend to be things that, you know, people kind of catch on to, that when they're going through challenges or rough times, they end up, right, becoming attracted to those things that create serotonin, right? You talked about that adrenaline. I know what it's like under Friday night lights to play football. I felt that too. It was only later that I started to recognize, you know, I grew up ski racing as well, the adrenaline, but the reason I got hooked on cycling was very similar. You know, as soon as I was 4 knee surgeries, introduced to the bike, all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, what's this feeling? And it was, right, that stoke, that serotonin coming back, like, this is awesome. Yeah. You know, so I got hooked on that feeling too. Now looking back, maybe, you know, years and years later, obviously LOTOJA, but was it the feelings that you were getting as you started to ride and race that got you hooked, and then adding on the training, meaning did it become a motivator to go out and get the feeling back, not just, hey, I want to go race my bike 200 miles. Does that make sense? Like the feeling you got from it gave you the motivation to do the training and the racing.
Right. And I think I enjoyed that feeling, and I needed that feeling. I had to get my fix. You know, it's like I was addicted to the serotonin.
Yeah.
And so I needed that, but then I also liked it. And as we were just talking about how, you know, when you suffer with somebody, you develop these friendships. Well, as I'm riding with all these guys in town, we're developing that relationship. So I'm looking forward to seeing my buddies, but also into getting the workout in. And then the race comes along, and it's like icing on the cake, especially if you get good results. It's like, wow, you know, this is too good to be true. I'm solving all my problems and having fun doing it. And it was awesome.
Yeah. That's cool. Great history.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So TJ, let's talk a little bit about why you race your bike.
Okay, so kind of just example of my older brothers. Like I said earlier, they both raced, and then he was super into bike riding, so it was just a big part of my life. Like, I would go ride all the time. I might have gone to a practice or 2 before I was even old enough to be on the team, and so I kind of felt like I was already a part of the team before even racing. So just since I got started in it, I think that's why I kept doing it. And go ahead.
What was it like? So your dad has been a coach for this will be his 11th year and I think the league's only been around 12 years. So Kirk, you're one of the few that have been here basically from the beginning. So your dad has been your coach for the last 6 years. What has that been like?
It's been great because I don't feel like I need to get like a trainer or anything like that because he already knows all the stuff. And then a lot of the time I just feel lazy and he makes me go. So like this morning I had to wake up at 6 and it's cold and I don't want to go out. But by the time I'm like 2 miles in, I'm grateful that I did wake up, and I probably wouldn't do that if I didn't have someone like pushing me to do it.
Okay. Do you resent your dad for that?
No.
In hindsight, you feel you love it, right?
Yeah. I'm glad he does it.
Yeah, totally.
Waking up early, it's not very fun. And I've talked to my other brother about this. He has PTSD waking up early in the morning because he would do the same thing to him. Wake him up early. We're going for a ride.
So how does he wake you up?
Now he just tells me. I'll just set an alarm. Sometimes I'll not wake up and stay in my bed, and he comes in. You need to get up.
So what kind of ride did you do today?
Just rode.
Okay. Just you and your dad, or did you
No, we go with a group. I think there was 5 of us today.
Okay. So road riding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that PTSD is real. His wife will turn on the lights in the morning and he'll freak out because that's how I used to wake him up.
That's how you used to
I'd
do
go
it.
down, turn on the lights, shake him, and he'd have to get up. And he had it worse than TJ. He wanted to do LOTOJA. So as I think a freshman, he's like, I want to do LOTOJA next year. And I let him, but I made him commit to that. And then I got him out of bed every day all summer long so that he would do LOTOJA.
Yeah.
And so he did that all 3 years that he was in high school. But I found that it wasn't very conducive to NICA.
So Colton, is this
Yeah,
Colton? He did LOTOJA 3 times
Yeah.
in high school.
Yeah.
Wow, that's remarkable.
Yeah. So he's going to, the NICA race. He's going to the first race. And I'm thinking he's going to kill these kids. And he had done well. He did well all 4 years, but this is his senior year. And I'm thinking, he's going to do like Mitt did. And the race is over and he's just warming up.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm getting him ready for a 9-hour ride.
Right.
And NICA's done in an hour. So I just found that it wasn't good. So he asked if he could do LOTOJA. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
There's lots of time to do that, but we're not doing that to you because I think it was a disservice to Colton.
Yeah, I think we had a similar experience where my son did LOTOJA last year, and he came out of it simply saying, "I think LOTOJA is for old men." that was ultimately what he decided after having kind of a pretty tough experience.
It's a different ballgame.
Yeah,
It is.
sure.
Jackson, my son, he raced in high school, but he did P2P, point to point, 2 times in high school. And like you said, 9 hours on a bike in Park City is not the same as an hour and 20 at NICA, right? It's just,
No.
it's a different animal.
Yeah.
So
Something else I've done that when I got into road racing, I had to teach myself because I didn't have anybody around to kind of mentor me. So I bought all kinds of books, anything I could find, and was reading them and trying to figure it out. And one of the guys, I can't remember which author it was, but he said after every race, you need to make a list of what went wrong and what went right, and keep that list, kind of a journal, so that you can learn from your mistakes and also learn what went well. So I've challenged every one of my kids when they first start racing. After every race, I'm like, all right, you go write down what you screwed up today and what you did right. And then, the next week before the race, I'm like, go review your notes so that you know what not to do tomorrow. And I think that's helped him get ready for races as well, to just know what he shouldn't be doing.
And the benefit of NICA is typically the next season you're going to race a couple of the same venues. In some cases, you may have already raced all 4 venues prior. And so that journal idea is it makes a ton of sense when you're going to revisit that course again, right? So do you reference your journal often, or how?
Yeah, I didn't do it as much as I should have last year, but every once in a while I would write stuff down, like what I did wrong in the race and what I did right. And as I was like mentally warming up, like in the pit zone, like with my music in, I would read that and just kind of keep it in my head.
Yeah. How do you warm up? What do you do?
I have a playlist I like to listen to. I like to write things on like my arms or hands, just things to keep me motivated.
What will you write?
Mostly like church things.
Okay.
So
Something that's going to inspire you.
yeah, so it's like inspiring things.
Okay.
And then I'll listen to music as we warm up, and then as we get closer, I have to take it out. But like as I'm walking up to the starting line, like I said earlier, visualizing. And my sister told me this once. She said the only time you can like be cocky or like hype yourself up, or like, I don't know what the right word is, be full of yourself or whatever, is in your head, like going to the starting line. So I like tell myself, I'm like, oh, I got this. The best one here is like just totally. Like,
I'm
just
super attractive.
stuff like that.
Guy here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Yeah. Just
I love that.
be totally
Daily
full of
affirmation.
myself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do
Best
that.
hair here. Yeah.
You do that most races as
Yeah.
you're walking to the.
Yeah. That's kind of just like my routine.
Okay. I assume you pre-ride
Yeah.
often, right? You know the course as well.
Yeah.
How do you? What do you do to keep your heart rate under control at the start?
At the start,
Uh-huh.
just kind of deep breaths, lots of prayers. Just like not focusing on what will like bring me stress, like not the outcome, but what I'm gonna do to get the outcome I want,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
So it seems like if you're prepared, you can control your heart rate a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But it's when you're stressed out or nervous or scared, that's when, you know, things start to spike and it gets a little, at least that's been my experience.
Yeah. And, you know, most of the things that all three of my kids have written in their journal about that is blowing up. You know, they go out too hard,
Yeah,
which I think every racer does at some point, if not
for sure.
multiple times.
Right.
But you blow yourself up and then you got nothing left when it matters. And that still is something I'm always trying to get him to calm down. And because that excitement of the race, you got to tame that, you know, you got to pace yourself.
TJ, you have a great attitude, at least from what I've seen on the bike and in the pits, and you know, the few times that I've been around you. What do you attribute that to?
I just try not to be negative because I haven't really ever found that to be helpful, and just kind of been taught to stay positive and just kind of my personality.
And it is his personality. He was like that as a kid.
Yeah,
He's just kind of a happy-go-lucky kind of person that seems to brighten the room and takes difficulty on with stride.
yeah. You're the baby of the family, right? You put up with a lot from your brothers and probably your sister. It sounds like she could probably
Yeah.
beat you up too. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
When-
she can take you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My older brother's like the one who gives it the most, like Colton.
Yeah,
But I haven't lived with him for a couple years.
yeah.
And my other brother, I can take him. So he's on a mission. He won't hear this.
That's funny.
He's now doing push-ups when he hears this. He's gonna come back now, man. You guys have talked a lot about psychology. I haven't heard one time you say I ride 12 hours a week. I'm doing 300 miles a week. Right? It seems like a lot of it's a mental preparation, the way you think about the work that you're going to do, but you haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the physical exertion, right? I that's relatively assumed. I would imagine from most people that you got to get out and do the physical work. But I'm impressed with how much you think about it. That you're intentional the way you go about training and racing, and the way that you think, about approaching the sport. Is that, Dad? Is that an intentional focus?
I think so. In college, I took sports psychology, and I've used that throughout my racing career. And so I think I've kind of tried to teach them some of those tools that I learned and that worked for me.
Yeah. Here's my big question for both of you, that I'm intrigued to know. Now, having heard you kind of describe your training and racing, think for a second, but go to your biggest disappointment. race, training, something, each of you, biggest disappointment where you really wanted a certain outcome or something to occur and it didn't happen, and how did you get through it?
I had like 4 come to mind the second you said that.
4?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember what year it was. Might have been freshman or sophomore year at Snow Basin. I always have bad luck there. I had broken the frame on my old bike, so I was on a hardtail. I wasn't super familiar with it, and I had a pretty good season that year. It was my freshman year, yeah. But I just bonked in my race, and I didn't place very close to where I wanted to place at all, and it kind of mentally set me back a little bit. And then last year, my first year doing varsity, my first race, I was like, okay, so my Snow Basin race, that had been my worst placing I had gotten in high school. And then in my varsity career, I haven't placed better than that. So just being used to being like podium, top 3, and then going to being trying really hard to get top 15, it threw me off big time. I wasn't really used to that. So it drove me to like work harder, but it also kind of set a block in my head that like I'm not doing as good as I did last year, all that kind of stuff.
Comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So talk through that a little bit more, if you don't mind, just how you're getting to this point. Because obviously you're still here, you're still battling. Sounds like you're still getting up at 6 o'clock and training.
Yeah.
So how are you moving forward despite the recalibration of expectations of placement?
Yeah. So kind of as I just went throughout the season, I started to realize I'm like, this is varsity. It's different. It's not JV or the freshman races. Like the kids are legit. So where I'm placing is still good. And these kids are more legit. They're doing just as much, if not more, training than me. So kind of just being happy with where I was. And then at state, I started in the very back row. So kind of just getting that experience of not being expected to like get top 10 or win was really nice to kind of just get to go and compete. And so that helped a lot.
With regards to Tom's question, Kirk, biggest disappointment?
There was a year at LOTOJA that 2 guys got away by Hoback Junction, and I totally buried myself for like 3 miles to bridge to them. And I caught them just as you're coming into Jackson, and we turned left. This was a different course than they're right now, but we rode the main road then into the...
Turned left at the main stoplight.
And I caught him just before that first left.
Yeah.
And I was feeling it. I was feeling awesome. And we're riding, the 3 of us, as we talked about earlier, working together. We hang the ride in Wilson, and we get about a mile, and I get a flat. And one of the guys who ends up being my teammate later looks at me, and he's like, "Oh, have a nice day." and 10-speed gearing had just come out, and I had a 10-speed. And so I was super nervous and the only year we've had it, the Mavic wheel support vehicle was there at the race.
Okay.
So the Mavic vehicle is behind me. I'm like, I got this. We got 8 miles to the finish. I'm going to get right back on him. So I get off, throw up my right hand, meaning rear wheel. He comes running up, and I'm like, I need a 10-speed. And he looks, he's like, yeah, I've got it. He slips it in. It was like clockwork.
Okay.
Probably a 20-second wheel change. I get back on and start pedaling, and the chain's just slipping. And he had given me a Campy wheel, and I was riding Shimano.
Oh, shoot.
So I had to stop and yell at him. That's what I needed. And by the time he got that one up, the group had come by, and it was all I could do to just catch back on.
So the peloton caught at that point. Yeah. Shoot.
And then I tried to sprint at that one, and I'm a cramper. I cramp easily. And being off my bike for just that 2 minutes did me in, and I went to sprint and almost crashed because I threw myself over the handlebars because I was cramping so bad. So that was fuel for the next year, You don't want to get out of bed in the morning. It's like,
Yeah.
I got a point to make.
Yeah. If you don't mind, talk about that a little bit, because we kind of joke about it, but there's something about the disappointments, whether it's TJ talking about your race, LOTOJA for you, Kirk, but the disappointments that kind of reshape and reframe a commitment level or the way that we think about, doing certain things, even if that's more balance, right? So I think very naturally, a lot of kids think when times go bad or disappointments happen, I need to double down. I just need to do double the work or be on the bike that much more. When in reality, that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
And maybe it's just more effective training.
Right.
Maybe it's more nutrition. TJ, by the way, when you dial the nutrition thing, we need coaching. Like the two of us. Because Nelson's frozen custard is not working and we can't figure it out. Like the science it's not jiving for our body types. So you got it dialed, we need some help on that.
Can we talk about off the bike here for a minute? TJ, when you were 11 or 12, your mom passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that your dad's mother passed away at a similar age. What did you understand about that at that time? I guess is my first question.
Took me a while to understand why.
Yeah.
And as I've grown older, I feel like I've kind of understood reasons why that would happen. But I feel like it kind of forced me to mature a little bit, kind of brought a lot of more reality of the world into my childhood. So kind of, I don't know, threw it off just a little.
Yeah, of course. I can't even imagine. What did you do to deal with the feelings and the emotions that you had?
I didn't really have an amazing way of doing it 6th grade. I did lacrosse and I still do it. That was kind of my physical activities, but I think biking did help a ton because I feel like it's easier to turn the anger into energy and just push yourself. I feel like 6th through 7th and 8th grade, I didn't quite understand it as much, so it didn't hurt as deep. But as I've grown older, it's started to come more real.
So it hurts more now?
More or less.
Yeah.
It's more real now. And I don't really think of it as a sad way because I believe that it's a break. She's not gone forever. I'll be with her again. And I think knowing that has helped a ton.
Yeah. Kirk, I didn't realize your mom had passed away too when you were a teenager. So you've got a really a unique perspective, and Raleigh passes away. You've got 4 kids. What did you want to do as a father for your kids at that point? How did you want to handle it and help your kids?
You want them to just get through it because, the pain is the pain. There's no way to get rid of that.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. All you can do is get up and take another step. So really, I just tried to bring us together and take the team, the family approach, and I think we did okay with that, learning to rely on each other and reach out to each other and work through it together.
Yeah.
It was a little bit hard. Colton, the son we've been talking about, was on a mission, and so that made it a little bit harder to bring him into the circle, but that was my hope and my goal, was just to keep our family unit strong and
Yeah.
and going.
What's your relationship like now with your 4 kids?
I think it's normal, but again, I have a skewed idea because of the way I grew up and what I experienced.
Yeah.
But I think we're close, and I think they're close. If we're closer than a family who hasn't gone through that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because every family, as hard as that was, I'm not dumb enough to think that that's the worst thing that can happen. And so as hard as that was for us, I know that everybody has challenges, whether it's, a parent or a sibling passing away, or if you're a parent, your child passing away. All of those things are hard, but that's kind of life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, hard things happen to all of us. So I hope that and it's not over, I hope we're making it through. We're still, battling, trying to get through it all.
Yeah.
And I think that he mentioned, it was the same thing that I noticed as a kid. It takes a couple of years when you're a kid and you experience a death like that to realize the finality of it. And I think sometimes it takes years to realize that mom's not coming home.
Mm-hmm.
So developing the belief that we have of the hereafters is a big thing. But I think for most kids that do experience something like that, it takes a while for it to sink in that, it's been 3 years now and nothing's changed, and it's not going to change. She's gone. I think as adults, we accept that a little bit better, but as kids, I remember, at 18, 19, just realizing that, this is it.
Yeah.
This is life now.
Yeah.
There's something to that, the way you describe TJ in your words about as time has gone on, you've started to recognize and you frame, right? Your adult brain now is framing, right? Situationalizing how that may have happened or the circumstances around that. And the way you describe that, I think, is beautiful. And there's going to be, I hope, a lot of teen children who hear that and kind of go, yeah, he gets that. Like, I didn't get it when I was younger, when I lost mom, dad, whoever, sibling. But as I get older, I'm starting to now recognize those things and recognizing that that's a relationship that's not there anymore, So thank you for sharing that. I think that that's super brave of you and Kirk for sharing that. When you think about it, before I asked you the question about disappointment, and we talked about the bike and the disappointments in performing, right? This is a disappointment at an entirely different level, right? And we call it a disappointment, but would you frame it in any other way, just in terms of the emotion, how that has felt? Is it an emptiness? It is a loneliness? And we ask because there are lots of people who we hear from who have described similar significant, events and disappointments in their life, So would you share any more about that, or would you like to share any more about that you've learned that may be helpful to others?
Yeah. It's kind of just really confusing because for me, I just felt a lot of anger, but I didn't really know what at, because it's not like I could be angry at God because that's who's helping me get through it, right? I can't be angry at really anyone. So there's just like anger, but no one who to be mad at. It's like, it's really confusing. And then also kind of just like a feeling of being a little lost, or I don't know the right word, kind of just like having a different like childhood. Like I feel like mine wasn't quite the same as most of my peers. Like I don't have the same kind of experiences that they did. And so like I don't really know what to expect going into like my adult life, like one day having a family, like I don't really know really what to expect or like how it should feel. Cause like I still have memories, but I was like 11.
Yeah.
So I don't have super solid, vivid memories.
Have you found a way, like when you start to have the emotions where you're just confused or sad or disappointed, have you figured out a way to overcome those? Like, do you do anything unique or different to help you get out of that rut? Or is it you haven't figured that out yet? And it's okay if you haven't. I'm just curious.
For me, it's all kind of like church things. So I love listening to like hymns and music.
Okay.
And just like praying for comfort and guidance. And I have felt like that's helped a ton.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Kirk, what about you? How do you deal with the emotions that I assume you feel? How do you cope with them?
You know, it is like the disappointments we were talking about. You have a goal. So I was married 25 years to really, and in your mind you're thinking, we're going to grow old together, we're going to go do all these things together in retirement, whatever. And then that happens, and there's huge disappointment, right? So I guess I could have quit, but instead I'm like, well, I can't quit. I've got 4 kids and a lot of years left in me, and I'll set some new goals. And so it's just kind of that resiliency that we all need. Everybody's going to have these trials, as I've mentioned, and so we need to learn to be resilient in some manner, or else we just shut down when it happens. And I've seen that. There's a lady in our community that was kind of an acquaintance of my wife, and when her husband died recently, she just shut down. And it's been years, and she still is shut down. And I don't know how to help her, and I don't know if sports is what helped me, but I think just, learning to deal with disappointment and that stick-to-itness, even if it's just life stick-to-itness, we need that so that we keep putting that foot forward.
Have you found, Kirk, that that is just it, to keep moving forward? It's not as if the emptiness is just gone. It's not as if the sadness is not there, but just to keep moving forward is the antidote. Yeah. Even if it stinks, if it's hard, to take the next step. Just keep moving forward.
Yeah. So I'm remarried to a great lady who I love, and we have, a good life, and we enjoy a lot of things, but that doesn't fill that hole. That hole is always going to be in my heart. But, you got to keep moving forward. It's not like I had to die when Really died. So yeah, you do have to keep putting that foot forward in whatever way. And I'm not saying everybody who loses a spouse needs to go get remarried. I'm just saying you need to keep putting a foot forward and progressing. If we're not progressing here, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're wasting time.
That is a brilliant statement. And, when you apply that to cycling and in life, there's something about just that progression, right? And we oftentimes as racers, we're like, well, the next progression is winning, standing on the top of the podium. But we've heard today that progression is really just doing your best and taking the next step, right? I mean, at the end of the day, losing a mom, a spouse to bike racing, like, it makes bike racing sound so silly, right? And yet at the end of the day, we're all here talking because of bikes. It's not because we're like trying to win the Tour de France. It's that biking has become a way to take the next step. Just keep moving forward. I love the movie A River Runs Through It. I don't know if you've ever seen it. In that movie, you got TJ. Come on, you guys see this someday.
Sorry, I've never even heard
It's okay.
He's dating himself a little bit.
It's a fly fishing movie, right? But the point in the show is that there's a river that runs through this family's life, they're very different. Dad, his two boys are very different people, but when they're on the river fishing together, they're connected, right? And it sounds like the biking, pedaling has been a metaphoric way, a symbolic way to just keep moving forward, right? And that's why we love the sport. We are very old, and if you saw us ride in spandex, you'd be like, those guys need to like play pickleball more, right? But it's a way to keep moving forward. It's our coping, you know, and that's when we go to practices, when we get a chance to interact with high school kids, the reason we love the sport is because it has in our own lives as adults become our way to cope and keep moving forward, you know, and that's going to be forever. So what you're learning, TJ, about coping and disappointment on the bike, those are life lessons that are going to serve you forever. It's awesome. What you just described, all that you've described, I'm like, this dude's going to kill it in life because you have become so good at taking the next step, right? And having lots of good people in the world who have gone through what you've gone through is what's going to allow those next generations to be coached up, just like your dad's been coaching up. It's awesome.
TJ, can I ask one question? I know we're kind of getting towards the end of the day and this good conversation, but what would you say to your peers that are sad, that are disappointed in whatever it might be?
I feel like it's a silly answer, but just try to find the things in life that bring you joy. Like try and find good friends who are good examples. I feel like that's a really big thing because you kind of become who your friends are.
Yeah.
And then like if you're struggling to like have friends, then find others who are in the same situation as you and try and reach out to them. Be someone else's friend instead of waiting for someone to be your friend. And then just it's so silly. Just have a positive outlook. Don't focus on the negative so much. Don't ignore it. Like acknowledge it's there, but just find what makes you happy.
Well said. Thank you.
Do you want to freestyle for a minute? Any topic. Kirk, do you want to talk about disc brakes versus, rim brakes? Like any really deep science?
I've got a great set of rim brake wheels if anybody needs them.
That says so much.
Are they on KSL right now?
No, but they should be because they've been sitting in bags and the bags will go with them. They've been sitting in bags for like literally 4 years.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, feedback, advice? You want to thank your first grade, teacher, TJ, anything?
Yeah, shout out to Mrs. Lee, my fourth grade teacher.
Nice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I actually was huge for him. That's
Yeah.
the grade he was in when his mom died.
Tell us,
what's her-
Fourth and
tell
fifth,
Mrs.
sixth.
Lee.
Yeah.
Tell-
Yeah, go into that.
Is she still teaching?
Yeah, I think so.
At what
Sunrise
school?
Elementary.
What's the name of it?
Sunrise
At Sunrise Elementary School here in
Best elementary
Smithfield.
school out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're
Why was she so great?
She how do I word this? She didn't make me feel different because of what happened. She kind of still saw me for who I was, not for what happened to me. I feel like that was a big thing because like all my peers, that's just kind of who I became to them. But I feel like with her, I was still me.
Yeah.
Like,
And she had started that year before this happened. She had all the kids keep a gratitude journal.
mm-hmm.
So every day they had to write something down that they were grateful for, some good experience or whatever, a gratitude journal. And so he's very goal driven. And so if he sets a goal like I'm going to do this every day, then he does. And so he was already doing that.
mm-hmm.
And then his mom dies. And the next day he has to find something he's grateful for.
Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that. I kind of stopped like middle school, just kind of forgot about it. But I started again freshman year, so I've been doing it every day for like 3 years. And so that helps me a ton.
What a great way to be positive.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because I have to find
yeah.
things. And especially after doing it, 3 things for about like 3 years, gets really hard. Because I tried not to repeat at all.
Uh-huh.
So I have to search to find what I'm grateful for.
Do you know where that 4th grade journal is?
Yeah, I have it. I'll look through it every once in a while.
I bet that's a pretty remarkable thing to read.
Mm-hmm.
TJ, if you would, and this is kind of random, but if you can find that and send us a picture of it,
Yeah.
we would love to post that.
Okay.
You know, with
Totally.
with this stuff, because those are the kinds of practices. I'm glad you said that. You know, that you talked about her, because these are those things that changes your mindset. I do the same thing. In fact, when I go into business meetings and I'm like, give me your 3 positives, give me your gratitudes. And they're just like, why do you do this? The business is whatever, you know. It's natural to want to go to the things that are happening bad in life, because that's what we want to fix. We want to feel less pain, right?
Yeah.
And yet what you're doing is the medicine. The positivity is the medicine, right? It's brilliant. Super cool. Anyone else you want to thank while we're doing that? I mean, your first date ever. I mean, you want to talk about
His next date?
He's like,
Next date.
oh, I love it.
I don't know.
Anything, Dad, you want to comment on, say before we wrap this?
So NICA started, as you guys mentioned, in Utah 12 years ago. And a guy who I want to give a shout out to, his name's Cameron Peterson. He's the one that brought that to Cache Valley the second year that it was in Utah. And he's the one that, you know, got the team together, which was the whole valley. And just because I was a name in cycling, he called me up and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Do you have any kids? Do you have any interest? And at that time, they didn't have junior devos, and Colton was a freshman, so it was perfect for him. He just slid in as a freshman. And back then, it was a lot more loosey-goosey, so I didn't actually register with NICA. I don't know how many years it was. A lot. I think I did like 5 or 6 years without, because it wasn't such a big deal back then like it is today. But it's kind of because of him that we have this in the valley. And he did it for about 6 years, 7 years. And so shout out to Cameron. It's all because of you.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron, for bringing it here. It's Preston and I think highly of all of those first generation NICA pioneers, because what it's grown to be is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, almost 8,000 athletes in the state of Utah. I mean, when we started hearing the numbers that of people just involved, not just the athletes, but how many ride leaders, how many parents, it's a huge following now in Utah. And regardless of the racing, it's the best mental health, right, program that is going on in the state. In my opinion, it is, you know? So that's cool. What a great shout out to Cameron Peterson. Yeah. Very cool.
And every year, so our teams are still pretty small up here. We're usually between 25 and 30 riders. And so at our year-end award ceremony, or just kind of wrap-up ceremony, all of the seniors get a chance to talk usually. And the stuff that they tell is amazing. You know, we've had people say they didn't have any friends, and somehow they found this club, and now they've got tons of friends. Or there's been a bunch of female riders who had body issues, the way that they saw themselves. And it doesn't mean that they lost a bunch of weight, but they all of a sudden appreciated their bodies because they were riding bikes on them. Just great stories that these guys give after 1 or 4 years of doing it. It changes lives. It really does.
Totally.
Loads of gratitude journal entries.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And as a coach, it's weird because, you know, who do we want to coach? We want to coach the kids who are going to podium. But usually they're not the ones who really get much out of it. The time you spend with the kids who are new to the sport and don't know what they're doing, at the end of the year, that's what makes you happy.
Totally.
It's great if your podium kids get there. But really what brings you the most joy is when that kid comes up and says, this changed my life.
Huge.
Yeah.
That's what kept us coming back.
And that's why we're involved in doing what we're doing now, because of the very thing you said.
For sure.
Yeah.
Staying involved is cool because you get the impact and you don't spend money on carbon fiber, which is like
What do
the
you mean?
best of it.
We still do.
Not for others. It's a selfish issue. We'll end on that. You've had your daily dose.